Hello, my name is Matthew Genslinger. I am the pastor at the New Church of Concord, and I'm here to tell you what we talked about in church this last Sunday. One of the books of the Lord's Word is called the Book of Revelation. And in this book, a man named John is on the island of Patmos, where the Lord opens up his spiritual eyes so that John can see many beautiful visions of heaven. Now, in the very first chapter of this book, the Lord shows John a beautiful vision of the Lord himself. And I'd like to read this vision for you. And as I do, listen carefully for what John saw the Lord holding in his right hand. So we read, "I came to be in the Spirit on the Lord's day. And I heard behind me a great voice, as of a trumpet, saying, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. And I turned to see the voice that spoke with me. And having turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands. And in the midst of the 7 golden lampstands, one like the Son of Man, wearing a garment down to the foot, and girded about the breast with a golden belt. And his head and his hairs were white, as white wool like snow, and his eyes as a flame of fire. And his feet were like fine brass, as if fired in a furnace, and his voice as the voice of many waters. And he had in his right hand 7 stars. And out of his mouth went a sharp, 2-edged sword. And his face was as the sun shines in its power." Amen. So what a beautiful vision of the Lord that John had on this island of Patmos. John described the Lord in many different ways, and maybe you can remember some of them. It says that the Lord was wearing a robe down to his feet. His eyes were like a flame of fire. A sharp sword was going out of his mouth, and his face shone like the sun. But on Sunday morning, one of the things I asked the children to really listen for was what the Lord was holding in his hand. Do you remember what that was? If you were listening, you would have heard that the Lord was holding in his hand 7 stars. 7 beautiful stars. Maybe you have been outside at night before, and you've looked up into the sky, and you've seen hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of stars sparkling in the sky. Well, in this vision, the Lord was holding 7 of these stars in his hand. Now, one of the things we talked about with the children is that these stars that the Lord was holding are supposed to remind us of something very, very important. Those stars remind us of all of the good and true things that the Lord teaches us in his word. So each of these stars can be used to remind us of one of the things the Lord teaches us in his word. So for example, on this star, I wrote the word marriage. Perhaps this star can remind you of all of the things the Lord teaches us about marriage in his word. Here's another star, and I wrote on here, how to become an angel. Perhaps this star can remind us of all of the wonderful things the Lord teaches us about how we can become angels in his heavenly kingdom. Another star here says that the Lord created all things. Another beautiful, true thing that we are taught in the Lord's word. So again, these stars, each one can remind us of something that the Lord teaches us in his word. One fun thing that we're taught in the writings for the new church is that in heaven, Sometimes you can see angels with stars around their heads. And if you see an angel with stars around their heads, any guess what that means given what we've been talking about today? Well, that means that that angel has learned many, many good and true things from the Lord's word. Again, those stars reminding us of all of those things that they have learned. Now, one of the things that we also focused a little bit on Sunday morning was trying to remember where exactly these stars were seen, who it was that was holding these stars. And of course, it was the Lord. The Lord himself was holding these stars. They were in his hand. We talked with the children about the fact that this is very, very important because it reminds us that all of the good and true things that we learn in the Word, they come from the Lord himself. They don't really come from me or from you or from your teachers or from your parents. Everything that is good and true comes from the Lord. And so if we want to learn about those things and understand them, we need to learn to love the Lord and approach him. Then he can reach out and share those things with us. Okay? So enjoy thinking about these stars that John saw in the hand of the Lord himself. And try to remember that these stars are meant to remind us of all of the good and true things we learn from the Lord and the Lord alone through his word. I look forward to talking to you next week about the Lord and another wonderful story from his word.